You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Best Comic Books of the Week show. These are books for the week of April 3rd, 2024, and I'm here, as always, with my man, Gray. What up, Gray?
What up, Jim? How you doing? Are you Genki?
I'm not. I'm so tired. We were talking, when we record this, you're in Japan. I'm in the U.S. I'm in the Philadelphia area, and we're about 13 hours apart. And at this point right now, it's late. Well, like what, 11 o'clock your time? Almost 10 my time. 10 a.m. I'm the one who's tired. I don't get it. I ended up not sleeping last night, so I do get it. Yeah, it was a disaster last night. I was just telling you, like in the middle of the night, our cat ended up just destroying a mouse. Wanted me to get involved with it for some reason. I ended up not being able to sleep. And it was at one point I did almost get to sleep. And it was one of those weird things. If you ever have this happen when you're up, and you're like, I'm never going to, and you feel okay. But then you fall asleep for like a half hour, wake up, and then you're exhausted. I don't get it.
Yeah,
I don't get the feel. Like your body must get in this mode and like you disturb it. But I couldn't go back to sleep even though I was exhausted. So now we'll see where this goes. We'll see how this is, but we're here to talk positively about comics. I know that is a crazy notion. You and Sully ended up on your YouTube channel, The Wakazashi's Tea House, which there will be links in. I watched your show, and you two are the most positive people that I know in comics, so people should go watch that. But that's why we have this show, and that's why I have you on, because you're Mr. Positive.
Jim, what do you reckon? If you get two positives together, does that not make a negative? Me and Eric.
I think that two positives together actually just made me smile. Is what ended up happening. So I ended up watching this great show. So check that out. And they talk about a bunch of books, a lot of which we'll be talking about here. And I did, while I was watching that, I hear Sully talking to you about couple books, and I'm like gritting my teeth, like, don't steer Gray in the wrong direction here. Like, I'm Mr. Negative, but I'm like, no, you ended up where he did convince you to read something you really like, and that kind of sets up our first book, because we'll start with DC, and before we go, we'll say what we always do. These are just our picks. These are the books that we like. Doesn't mean that we hated every other book, and some books we just aren't reading, haven't gotten to yet, and if you like books that we don't talk about, mention them in the comments, because what we like about the show is to get people excited and maybe pick up things that they weren't aware of or didn't think
please do
good or didn't know about it. And that's kind of the whole play, because it's few and far between, it seems, for people to actually like a bunch of books. So I always welcome, if you like 50 books, please put all 50 in the comments and we'll end up checking them out, things like that. But not a lot of big two again. Me and you last week when we did it, we were saying not a lot. And I actually thought a lot of people were going to fight us on that, but nobody did. Because
are we starting to sound like a broken record, Jim? We're saying the same thing, aren't we, week by week? But it's true. It's been a sparse week for the big two.
Yeah, and DC doesn't have a lot of books coming out each week. They used to have at least 1 or 2 weeks that there was like 13 books. And I say that I know because doing the podcast, and we try to review everything. When we have a podcast and we have to sit down, me and Eric who do it, and we have to sit down and talk about 10 books, you know when that happens, because it's tough. Now it's 4, 6 at the and it's crazy. But I said to Eric, even when we were doing the stuff, it was obvious that a bunch of these miniseries were ending and they weren't replacing them like they usually do, which ended up, and people, even creators, announcing, hey, I'm off this book at this number. Ram V, Detective Comics, even Tom Taylor on Nightwing. And as you kind of put it together, it does look like a lot of stuff is heading towards something in September after the Absolute Power. I think there's going to be like a new Status Quo, maybe some new number ones,
things like that.
Yeah. But I don't mind right now doing the podcast with only like 4 books. It's nice.
Are you guys not covering Scooby-Doo, Jim?
We are not.
Scooby-Doo books out this week.
If I did read it, I'm guaranteeing you somebody will say that we should read the the Batman Scooby-Doo mysteries. I hear that book is really, really good. Like My Man Simon who likes a lot of fancy books. It's one of his favorite books. So I end up,
nice
my goodness.
One.
Yeah,
okay.
It's crazy.
I'll check it out then.
I'm actually upset that I didn't read it, so maybe I could have put it on because we kind of need some more big two, but we have one from DC. This is where I blame Sully, because without Sully, we wouldn't have any, because he convinced you on this. Yeah, and it's Poison Ivy number 21. You're going to talk more about this, because I can't say that it's one of my favorites, but I do like it enough. It's written by G. Will Wilson with art by Masao Takara. It's $3.99, and it is the Origin of the Species finale, that year one story. And I actually saw it almost in real time, Sully convincing you to read it, because he said the art's really cool and it's this year one story, which I think in these 3 parts, it's getting better each part. And I do think this is one of the better issues of the series, and specifically this year one. But you talk a little bit about it, because you've been in and out with the Poison Ivy book, right?
I have. I read part 1. I missed part 2. I'm not sure why, but it was because of Sully that I read part 3. And this was a real big surprise, Jim. I'm not just saying this. I really, really enjoyed this issue as a single issue story. We've got, Pamela Isley, real origin story. And what makes it so good? Partly it's a fantastic appearance of an old style Batman and Robin, an early Batman and Robin, but it's the art by Takara. He draws beautiful women beautifully, like a European style. Not just the bodies. I'm talking about the facial expressions.
It is a European style. You're right. And I don't know if people realize this, but Pam, pretty good looking, and classic looking too. Like, not only getting the classic Batman and Robin, but this is the issue where she actually becomes pretty much Poison Ivy.
Yeah,
and it's the old school. It's the classic Poison Ivy, and pretty much her first encounter as that.
That's what I've been
Batman.
missing, Jim. Don't know about you. It was so nice to see that. The original, the one that I remember reading back in the day.
And the cool thing about this issue is that I think that, take a little bit like the cliffhanger that's leading back into the regular series, where we do have Woodrue being reborn and we have a zombie apocalypse kind of plan. But if you take those, you could use this as like a one shot almost in, like if it was a collection of Poison Ivy stuff, because it is that classic feel. And
I think it works, as a one shot. You're right.
And that's why I think it works okay for, even though you missed the second part, it was kind of the same old. I hate to say that I haven't been loving the Poison Ivy series. It's not horrible for me, but it's all over the place. I think it feels very disjointed. And we have in the regular deal, Janet from HR. Not a fan, and that
What's
gets away.
To Janet? Are you not missing it, Jim?
What's the deal? No, I'm not. And I think there's some Janet issues coming up. And what I love about year one is no Janet. So you get Poison Ivy, which I don't mind in the book. But it's been a weird book, and the book changed a lot from the first trade. It was just going to be 6 issues. Then they announced it'd be 10. And when they announced that, the book seemed to change course a bit. Then, adding Harley, going back to Gotham. Then you go from 10 to ongoing, and it changed again. And there's been some wacky parts of it, but people do. I understand that people do like it, and the people who like it love it. So it's that may not be and it sells. People tell me it sells.
That's what I've heard, Jim. I watch a YouTube channel. They talk, it's a comic book shop basically, just doing reviews, and this guy says this book sells every month.
Everybody
really
tells me it's the variant covers and things like that. But even so, I think there's one thing about it is, even if it doesn't have the biggest audience, they're buying they might be buying more than one issue. Like, they're so into it. So that's a pretty cool thing. And that's even with, stuff like YouTube channels and things. There's always how the podcast, how I always say to a lot of people, do you want 1 million subscribers that don't care? Or do you want 100,000 that are loyal and devoted? Now, I'd take either, obviously. But the idea, it seems to have that loyal. I shouldn't have went that high in number with that. I should have went with, a little bit different.
Numbers, Jim.
Yeah, really. But it seems like people are really into it. So that's it for DC.
Yeah, it's recommend. Really good.
And it does have good art, and it's pretty cool. And again, if you wanted to jump in, I wouldn't say it's the greatest jumping on point, but because it feels like that one-shot deal, you can get an idea at least what the art's like in the series and things like that. And if you like it, go back to the beginning. But we'll move over to Marvel. Marvel had more books than DC, but only has one still on the list here. and it's a back-in-the-day feel book. It's Spider-Man Shadow of the Green Goblin #1, written by J.M. DeMatteis, art by Michael St. Maria, but I like to say Michael Sta period Maria. I did not know that S-T-A period was actually Saint. Maybe because I'm a dummy. It's $4.99, and in it you're going to have one of these books that's going to go back to a certain period and re-examine some things, see some things that we might not have known. It's a proto-Goblin story. This is Peter Parker Spider-Man who just became Spider-Man. I mean, him and Aunt May are still dealing like fully with, oh my God, Uncle Ben's gone, and now we have.
It's only a few weeks, isn't it? After that,
yeah. So it's pretty intense, and even in that, he even doesn't know his strength. He's still learning to be Spider-Man, but there's some good moments in it, and the idea of this proto-Goblin, where you have him, being that experiment deal, and it's expanding that story. You have Norman Osborn who experimented on him, and in it, you think at the beginning that this proto-Goblin wants to go after Harry, and he's going after Harry just for revenge. Like, Norman took my family away, I'm going to go after Harry. By the end, I won't spoil the cliffhanger, but there's somebody else involved that's pretty crazy. Like the idea where you think it's Proto-Goblin full out revenge, and then we see there's somebody else involved that wants revenge even more. But I like in it has a bunch of good Spider-Man moments.
Yeah, it does.
The only thing that pulled me back a bit, it's heavy narration, which I get we're back in the day deal, but the narration, and I don't know if you feel the same way, talked about it on our podcast, the narration at points like even interrupts conversations going on. Like, you're being told, hey, we're going back in the day, we're going to see what happened, I'm going to fill you in on some things. But then Peter almost overstays his welcome with the narration. But people have pointed out it feels old school that way. I hope that pulls back a little, because I thought it was cool. How about you?
No, you're right, Jimmy. It was a little bit narration heavy, a bit over the top, but yeah, I think what it was that people really enjoyed was the way that, J.M. DeMatteis has got Peter's voice, and I mean, why wouldn't he after all those years of writing Spider-Man? But that's what they liked. But yeah, it was a bit weird, that.
And I think that people are in a mode too that they really like these classic things with the classic writers going back.
Yes.
And, Peter David stuff I still think is the best, but he's
Me
sick.
too.
Right now
really
you do
good.
have the Symbiote 2099 deal, but we talked about this before. I think we picked it on the show, the idea that was written before because he's still recovering from multiple strokes and things like that. Hopefully he does come back, but J.M. DeMatteis is cool. I like J.M. DeMatteis, and Michael St. Maria. The art is really good.
How good is it, Jim? On my review, I was trying to remember, who does it remind me of? It's almost like a better version of John Romita Jr. That's the only way I could describe it. What did you reckon?
Heard you say that to Sully, and Sully got upset because he loves John Romita Jr. Yeah, it really feels old school like that, but like you said, it also has that modern feel as well. But everything's really detailed, and I hope that he gets more work at Marvel or DC or whatever.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
I thought it looked really good. Like I said, you get the classic stuff. Gwen Stacy, you get Harry, you get Norman. It's Norman pre-Goblin. He's trying to figure that out and things like that. Aunt May. At one point, one panel looked like Aunt May was going to give Peter a backhand. I laughed at that.
I saw that, yeah.
And also, again, because it's so quick, Peter doesn't have a job. And I tried to explain to him, it's post-wrestling, but pre-taking pictures, so he has no money and he wants to help out Aunt May. And there's a nice scene that he does a birthday party. And this kid's kind of a jerk, but then you find out why. And
yeah,
it ties in with Peter, and it's very nice. So,
Jim, how sus was his agent? I just got to ask you about him. I forgot his name, but oh my God, that was so funny.
And he's like, hey, it's the typical, hey, nobody wants your job, because that's the thing. Jay Jonah's already starting the Menace deal, so nobody wants to hire him. Yeah. It's funny. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I'm looking forward to it next month. So when it comes back, I'll
same here.
Right there for it. But that's it for the big two, unfortunately. But we have a lot of indie stuff. And I know that some people would already kind of realize some of that indie stuff and you know what that is. But before we get to the big, I'll call it the big three that I'm going to suggest, we'll start with The Sacrificers. Sacrificers #7 coming back. And I haven't read it yet. This is your pick. I'm sure I'm going to like it. I just want to remind people that I did name the letters page. I have to say it every single time. But it's written by Rick Remender, art by Max Fumiera. and it's $3.99. But you tell us about that, and it's a book that's solid. Like it's an easy pick, right? Each month when it comes out.
It is, yeah. If you've got any interest in like fantasy storytelling, like give it a shot. But what surprised me, like this had a 2-month or it might be 3-month hiatus, Jim. I kind of forgotten about it. Did you?
That's what happens. Yes.
Yeah.
When it came out, and here's the thing too, just to tell everybody, I guess full disclosure, we get review copies for a lot of these. So when they come out, I saw Sacrifice, and the first thing I saw, because the trade came out as well. And if you haven't read the first 6 issues of The Sacrificers, go and get the trade. It's really good and well worth it.
Huge recommend. Yeah, definitely.
I saw that for some reason, and this is why when I'm doing, and I say I didn't read it because I didn't realize, because it hasn't come out in so long, I thought they were just giving us the trade. For some reason, right above it was the issue, and it just kind of, and they end up I'm trying to explain and ask people for forgiveness for not reading it. They changed the names. It's almost in code sometimes. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, just the trade. I thought that's really cool. People will catch up and whatnot, not realizing what it was out. I'm going to read that later today. And then a side deal, me and you both do reviews on YouTube, even though we've been told reviews don't work on YouTube. But we like doing reviews. But
reviews don't get views.
They don't. But I actually this week kind of had, well, first off, had an epiphany that I'm a dummy, and I'm still going to do reviews, but also the idea.
You just realized?
Yeah. I should have realized. My wife tells me all the time I'm a dummy. I just don't listen to her. I don't listen to her like everything else she would tell you. But the idea of all this, people are down with the big two. Past 2 weeks, we've had like 3 books from the big two on our best of. So I actually thought, okay, people say that reviews don't work on YouTube, but they really say that indie reviews don't work. So I'm really going to be a dummy. I might start reviewing some more indie stuff just to mix in some things that I like. Because every time I review the big two, you review the big books, Amazing Spider-Man, you review Batman. When they're not hitting, it just makes you feel like you're just a negative Nancy all the time. And then people will have comments which upset. Oh, don't you like anything? You're like, well, I do, but I'm not reviewing. I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to start reviewing things that I like. But that's me. Go tell us about The Sacrificers.
Okay, well, as I say, this picks up the story from like a couple of months ago, and it's almost a single character issue, this, Jim. If you know the daughter of the sun god and the moon goddess, like she's called Soluna. She's on the run. She's being chased through like a really brutal landscape, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it's incredible. Things happen. I was so caught up in this story. It pulled me in. I couldn't stop reading it. I got to the end. I was like, oh my God, I want to get the next issue right now. So it left me hungry for more. It really did.
And I'm usually hungry. I'm telling you, Sacrificers.
I'm always hungry.
Yeah, I am too. Sacrificers is one of those books that you could fake the funk and just say, oh, I don't want to go, but it's like, I don't even have to read it to know it's probably going to be on the show. It's that good. When it does come out. You could
say just for the art, couldn't you say, oh, don't care about the story, but the art's amazing. But no, the story, seriously, is really, really good.
Yeah. And I'm not, it's funny, I'm not a huge art guy. I'm more the story guy.
Yeah, that's right. You say that, yeah.
The first bunch of books that we've already mentioned, I think I really do like them a lot for the art. So that just shows you how good it is. And the stories, for the most part, are good as well. Sacrificers is great. We'll move to the next one, which I think might be, I think people may like this, but it's kind of probably a surprise. It's the TMNT Saturday Morning Adventures April Special #1. First off, I give it full credit because DC had the April Ape issue, and it came out in March. I don't understand what the hell they were doing. Why would you do that? So right away, this gets credit and props for coming out in April. But if you've been reading the TMNT Saturday Morning Adventures, it's really fun. If you haven't, it's pretty much the cartoon back in the day, Saturday morning cartoon, in the deal written by Eric Burnham. This has art by Sarah Meyer, and it is oversized. The art's not as good as the normal deal, but it's still really good. It's $7. I'll tell you, it's there. But you have a lot of pages. It's oversized, and it's fun. You end up having April, and she ends up getting thrown through a portal and kind of goes to a different dimension time deal where she hooks up with Ace Duck, one of the characters from the series, and Ace Duck pretty much is a Duck Indiana Jones. In fact, it's full out Indiana Jones homage. You have, they're running away from Boulder. Like all the stuff is there. Also being chased by, German ducks in there, like pretty much directly from Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's a lot of fun. In the meantime, you have the turtles trying to figure out how to get her back. And you also have Mona Lisa, the female turtle, who actually is really, really good in this as well. And I actually thought that it would be something like, I know that my man Eric, not a huge Mona Lisa fan, but he has admitted like that was because of his age. But a lot of people seem to like Mona Lisa, and I do as well. So it's really cool. I'm going to tell you again, it's $7, so you kind of have to decide if it's your
pricey,
thing.
Jim. I'm looking at the cover right now. It looks
really
cool.
fun.
I like this style. This art style looks really good.
And it's very cartoony. It looks like it's, straight from the cartoon. But again, if it's not one of those things that if you're like, oh, I'd love to check that out, it's $7. If you want to check it out, go and just get the first issue of the TMNT Saturday Morning Adventures, and then you'll know if you'll like it or not. It's real fun. It's a real fun. I like the Saturday Morning Adventures books. There's a D&D one coming out right now. There's been the G.I. Joe and things like that. So I have enjoyed them. It's one of those things
IDW,
too.
Isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it's IDW. I should have said that.
Yeah.
And Image was Sacrificers. It's a funny thing. What I like about the TMNT and all the Saturday Morning Adventures pretty much is the idea that if I do miss one or two, it doesn't really matter. I could just jump back in, if I'm busy or forget something or whatever. It's cool that way. But we'll move on to the next deal. Also an Image /Skybound/Energon Universe Void Rivals number 8, written by Robert Kirkman. Art by Lorenzo De Felici, and it is $3.99. And it's the Energon stuff. People love it. I almost didn't put this on the list. I told you, actually, we read it right before we recorded. I actually missed this one. I'm like, I better read it and see it. I'm putting it on the list, but I'll tell you, with Derek and Salila going through the desert, being chased by Proximus, it ends up being a big fight. It's a big fight issue. I like the dialogue in it. I like the flashback at the beginning with Salila, but when you end up in the fight, gets a little wonky. Some of the choreography is a little, there's, what's going on because it's just pretty much at one point, it's just 1-on-1. Salila, Proximus, Derek, he's going at it too, but I don't know why, but it ended up kind of not feeling as big as what this fight should have been, especially with this Proximus. So when you end up at the end, I'm not going to spoil it, but a huge cliffhanger. At the end, I'm like, oh crap, it is
a huge cliffhanger. Yeah.
The thing, what is happening on the page might be a little, but I know what's going on and it's big. So I like seeing it. But by the end, it's like, oh God, I need the next issue because of the cliffhanger. And I'm telling you, it just made the list. I almost didn't put it on, but I know that people will end up and I did like it. So I ended up putting it on there.
Are you still enjoying the art, Jim? Lorenzo De Felici.
I'm telling you, I thought that the art was a little off in this one when you started
doing. It took me a bit to get used to it, yeah, but I like it now. I've got used to it.
I like it. It's just when you look at this fight, like I'd rather see and have a better choreography in the fight. I actually even looked because I'm sitting there reading. I'm thinking, I'm like, wonder what the reviews are like. And I saw Sus Gabe, and the first thing I saw in Gabe's review is like the choreography's off, and I'm like, why am I agreeing with Sus Gabe? I mean, something's wrong then, but I did agree with him on that. 9 out of 10
for Predator.
But I did like it enough, and the cliffhanger is huge. So if you have been reading, you'll get it anyway. But if you haven't, you have to get it for the cliffhanger. So I put it on the list. But we're going to go to the last 3 books of the podcast. I'm sure that we'll go a little detail in these because they are the Ghost Machine books. I thought, I know that I knew these would be big. I actually thought there'd be more hype. I thought I
did too. And I don't feel like there has been, Jim. I've not heard that much hype about them. How about
you with me that I didn't know, but I kind of hoped that the hype would be as much as the Transformer number 1. And I'm saying when you go, but when Transformers number 1 came out.
Oh my God, that was huge. Yeah, it was massive.
It was huge. And I thought, okay, you got, I don't know, 3 books in one day is crazy, but I didn't mind. But I really thought it was going to be more hype. People seem to like them a lot, but not the hype. But
why do you think that is, Jim? Like, there's not been such a big, huge, coverage of them?
I guess one of the things is Transformers, people were so down on the IDW stuff.
Yeah,
so that when you have that, that's big. Plus, I don't know, it kind of, the hype leading up to it, once you saw the Transformers in the Void Rivals deal, people went nuts. And then I think Daniel Warren Johnson was another reason, like, oh my God, this guy's great.
Too. I think it's him.
Yeah, I do. And I think that there's still people who aren't really down with Geoff Johns for reasons movie-wise.
That's weird, isn't it? Because he's a huge name in the industry. You know, he's a massive name. He's got a great track record. You know, Geoff Johns, and not just him. He made a big point of like, okay, we're going to have fantastic artists on all our books. You know, they're going to look great, and they do look great. But I really did think there'd be more hype for this.
Yeah, I did too. And when you go, I said on my review, I think for Rook, where I said that Jason Fabok's art is my favorite of the three books.
Yeah.
But I said, you can't go wrong with any of them. I mean, and that's what I thought. The coolest thing about these three, I thought, was when I talked to people, hey, what's your favorite? Or even when they were looking forward to it after that one shot, like everybody seemed to have a different book or a different reason. Like they're like, oh, I like Redcoat because that's cool history and supernatural. Oh, I like Jason Fabok's art. Oh, I like Gary Frank.
I like that about that. Yeah.
Is there something I don't know, because not everybody's reading DC stuff anyway, but 3 books from Geoff Johns, I think we should start taking bets of what gets delayed first, because he cannot keep a schedule. And
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
The one I go with has to be Geiger. Not because of anything, but it's because Gary Frank, when they did Doomsday Clock, it got horribly delayed.
Doomsday Clock all over again.
And we'll start with Geiger. Geiger #1, written by Geoff Johns with art by Gary Frank. All these are $3.99. And as we go through these, each one becomes more and more pages, but still is $3.99, which is pretty cool. But the Geiger stuff, there was no hype. I'm telling you, I did a review and it did nothing, I think, because it's kind of like, hey, this is Geiger again. Like, this is a book that's continuing, and you can tell in this first issue, I still liked it, but you can tell that they're trying to get newer readers into it.
I think that's why, Jim, because it's not a brand new, character, a brand new series. It's you had the miniseries before this. You had a few like one shots.
Yeah, one shots.
That must be why it's not taken off.
It has to be like the Geiger deal. Like they're like, whatever. And I'll tell you, in my review, I even said I thought that the way that this is done, how Geoff Johns, and the art looks great, but again, you're not wowed by it because you've seen Geiger before. It's Gary Frank. It's the same Geiger art, but I like the way that there's really not any narration of like, oh, and this happened before, and oh, Geiger, he went into Las Vegas and took care of these knights and whatever. You get it through the story and a character who shows up, this knight, Nate. And I like the way that, like, the idea that how you find out that Geiger's being chased by the military is because this Nate shows up and says, hey, the military's going after you, but I'm kind of pushing them away to other. So you learn it through the dialogue and through the actions. Yeah. And even at the beginning, you kind of get a really good idea of what Geiger's about, because a town in a very cliche Western type way, even if you go Bug's Life, the idea of, hey, we come in here once a year and we get our tribute, and you don't have it. Well, we're going to beat you up and take your women and children. We've seen that in Unforgiven, Bug's Life. Like, that is a very tropey thing, but he uses that because it's easy to get into without explanation. But when they're doing that, Geiger's just sitting there reading a Western novel, not even paying attention until he's gets
reading
Blood
Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, and I love that, Jim.
Yeah,
that is such a great book.
And again, it's that play of a post-apocalyptic world that is like a Western. Then later, it feels a lot, and somebody even mentioned it on YouTube, and I agree, like a Don Quixote situation, or even like a quest type deal, because you find out that somebody may have been cured for what he is, the glowing man, what Geiger is. So you even get almost like a Lord of the Rings feel.
A quest for the Grail kind of thing, even King Arthur.
This Nate felt a lot like Sam in the Lord of the Rings to me. This, he comes in.
I can see that.
Yeah, so it was cool. But if you've read Geiger and you know Geiger, you're not going to get that much new. You're going to kind of get this leading into it very slowly, catching people up who might be jumping in. But I thought it still played out well for both older and newer readers in a way that it wasn't just, hey, here's the recap narration at the end. I was excited about it, but less excited than the rest of the books, because the other ones are new and you had that sense of wonder and excitement that you don't really get from a redo series that you've already had a mini.
Me too. I think that's why it was my third favourite out of the three, but I like the character. I like, the glowing man. I like Tariq. He's a really cool character.
Yeah, I like him too.
Jim, some of those panels, where you see him like in the glowing man, like full attack mode, they are so good.
So good. And and that's the other, you get to see kind of power set. You get to see what happens with them. You get Barney, the two-headed dog, who's great.
The two-headed dog, yeah.
I love the one point because then you get reminded you're in a post-apocalyptic, like irradiated dip, because I love when Barney, the two-headed dog, is so mad that it has to eat bees. And you have, in a way that you would talk to a dog, come on, Barney, you can't eat the meat. It's all bad because of the irradiation. And you get a reminder, recap, maybe, of Tariq's family and what he lost, things like that. So I thought it was really well done. But again, not as exciting as the other. And we'll move to the next one. This is where, and I actually have not seen one person tell me that Geiger was their favorite of the three. And I do think it's because it's kind of, we've already seen that. Let's get going. Yeah, and I do think that it could change as you get more and more into this new story. But it is the fight between Daenerys Redcoat and Rook Exodus. I changed my mind. I'll tell you, when I first read these and just boom, 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 I thought Redcoat was the best. I thought Rook was second and Geiger third.
Okay.
I flip-flopped. I'll tell you, when we get to Rook, I did flip-flop with multiple readings, but the next one we'll talk about is Redcoat #1, written by Jeff Johns with art by Brian Hitch, $3.99 again, and you get about 40 pages. You keep adding the pages, but keep the price, which I said that's really cool. And this one's crazy. By the end, it didn't feel quite complete. Like it's oversized, but I felt like we were just getting going with our main character, Simon Pure, because we do start out with some intriguing stuff. But it didn't involve him for a bit. You end up having
that's right.
The founding fathers, we find out. And it's one of those things. It is like a, what's it called? The movie with Nick Cage.
National Treasure. That's the vibes I was getting from it. Historical version of that.
Yeah, it's a very like National Treasure, supernatural version, deal. Because you get at a point where our main character is actually, you should love him. He's a British soldier in the Revolutionary War, but he deserts. He's running away. He's getting chased. And he stumbles into this whole deal where they were trying to give this power to Benjamin Franklin, which made me laugh because if you don't know, Benjamin Franklin, he loved to go around in the nude. The guy didn't like wearing clothes.
Really?
And when you see pictures of him, you kind of think, he's like one of those guys. I don't get it. Like, for the most part, I've maintained a decent enough shape throughout my life. I was in better shape at one point. But I would never take my shirt off in public because it's just not me. I walk around during the summer and you see guys who should not be shirtless mowing the lawn. You're like, Jesus, like, how does this guy? Benjamin Franklin never seemed like he was in good shape, but this guy liked to walk around in the nude constantly. He also liked to bang a lot of ladies. He was a ladies' man.
Oh, really?
But yeah, in this, he's on like an altar slab and he's just got like a washcloth on and they're going to give him this power. They're doing this whole deal. It's very Illuminati / supernatural / demonic.
Yeah, it has those vibes, doesn't it? Yeah.
The setup is you end up having Paul Revere's last ride and he ends up getting stopped by the British and the Redcoats are coming and it's a good line. They're like, no, we're already here, jerk. And they start beating the crap out of him. And John Hancock saves them with crazy spell that ends up controlling and doing these fireflies. So you have this magic.
Jim, just got a comment. I loved their British accents. I think Jeff Johns really got those down. I reckon he had help from Brian Hitch. What do you reckon? Because Brian Hitch is a British artist, isn't he?
Yeah. And actually, I was wondering,
hello, love.
I'll ask you. Hello, love. Paul Revere here. What you doing there? I laughed when they said, when he's like, the Redcoats are coming. Oh, now, bloody sir, we're here already. And you go, I said the one guy looked like a combination of Tim Roth and Pete Townsend. You have to look at it. I'm like, oh my God, look at this guy. He looks just like
Stoltz or someone else.
It looks, really. But I did like that. What I was wondering, though, is was there a disconnect for you because you're not American? I don't know what you learned. My mom is from Britain. She's obviously older than me and you. But when I would ask her, like, what did you learn about the Revolutionary War? What did you find out? And she had like something, like she said they didn't learn anything about it.
No, we weren't taught anything, Jim, about it in school. Seriously.
And I think that what she said to me when I asked her, she's like, oh, we learned that you guys were jerks and weren't appreciative of Britain. I'm like, that's kind of a spin, but okay. So I was wondering, like, the idea of Paul Revere, The Last Ride of Paul Revere, and the things with John Hancock and things, if that translates to.
I didn't know them. I only knew the name of John Hancock from the signature.
Yeah, and that's his deal. Like, the guy likes his penmanship. But yeah, I wonder if, like, as we go forward, if we have more of that, if there's going to be more of a disconnect of these characters, because it's pretty cool if you know the story. Obviously, though, you still liked it and don't really know that as much, because, yeah, my mom said they didn't really teach that. It's crazy. But I guess you don't teach when you lose. There's a lot more things that Britain can talk about that they won, and maybe in sus ways. But
I enjoyed this. On the second read, for me, this really improved. My first read, I wasn't sure. I was like, Simon Pure, he's a bit of a bloody idiot. But second read through, was like, okay, I'm starting to like this. I like the supernatural angle. That's what I liked about it.
I love history mixed with. Now, he also, actually, when we said it's like national treasure, it also feels a lot like Forrest Gump. Because all of a sudden, the Simon Pure, who's immortal, he actually gets this power. He's not supposed to. He gets away. And it seems like these founding fathers, they're going to be after him because of what he did.
It's all a mistake, isn't it? That's what's so funny about it. It's like an accident, yeah.
At one point, they're talking to Ben Franklin and saying, I hope you're worthy. And he's like, screw it if I'm not, whatever. But Ben Franklin, pretty big guy historically. And then the power goes to the schmuck, who is really a schmuck. They even say at the beginning, and some people were thrown off by this book a bit because it is a bit goofy. It is goofy. It does have some humor.
That's why I liked it, Jim.
That's why I liked it. I actually really liked it. Even on the credits page, it's like it says he's a tool. I'm like, you kind of go right away with, okay. But he ends up in being immortal doesn't mean he doesn't die. He just comes back. And so he gets killed a bunch of times. And you see all these things that happen through the deal. And he says he's a scoundrel. He ends up killing people. And there's a funny play where through the years he says, I keep running into these things where these people come and get revenge. And it's like, you killed my father. You killed my brother. And these new guys are, you killed my second cousin. And he's like, it's down to that. But it's funny. And then he gets killed, gets dug up then by a young Albert Einstein. And by the end, I'm like, I don't know what the heck's going on, but I like it. And then you have the founding fathers there. We're coming to get him. But that's where it ends. And it didn't feel, that's where it felt like it just got started. So my score, I gave it on my review, I gave it a decent score, but it still was, it felt like that was a prelude, not a full issue. And that's why the next book ends up being my favorite. But you even mentioned on the video that you were doing with Sully, the idea that it does feel like a John Constantine a bit with the Simon Pure. And, he's British, he's kind of goofy running around. I said, I could see that. 100%. I think it's cool.
Well, maybe that was Zach in the chat, in the Slack. Yeah, Zach was talking about it. I think it was Zach who said, I'm getting John Constantine. I was like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. That's really cool. It could be like cool one deal. Of his, what's the word? What's the opposite to ancestor? Like a predecessor.
I know what you're saying. But yeah, and the way that it plays out, I like the idea that he's kind of a goofball. He doesn't really know. And what I think then is he's going to get involved in something and become, a little more of a good guy to try to fix things or do something. I don't think he's just going to be running around like a goofball. Also, I will mention at one point he's running down the street and he ends up seeing a lady and says, "Oh, nice frock, my lady." And it really reminded me of Ferris Bueller when he's running through the backyards and he's commenting to the people. I was like, I think that might be a little homage there too. It's just fun. But then you get to the last one and it'll be pretty much the last main book that we're talking about. And it's Rook Exodus, #1, Jeff Johns, Jason Faubuck. This is about 45 issues or pages for $3.99. And every one of them looks great. I mean, Jason Faubuck's art is stupendous. And this one feels different more than any of the others because it's a sci-fi book. We're not even on Earth. We're on the planet Exodus. First read through, I'm telling you, I kind of was like, okay, you're got some info dump stuff going on with this planet, but reading it a second time, I'm like, yeah, this is really good. It's a weird concept of, looks like Earth is kind of, overpopulated, so people end up leaving Earth to go to this manufactured terraformed planet, but then that went to crap real quick and they have to go back. but only like it's a crazy deal. Most of the people who went to Exodus were the rich people, but then when they were on Exodus, the ones that remained rich could leave, but left behind some people. But really, at this point, it doesn't seem like there's that many people left. One of our main characters, Rook.
They left behind the staff, didn't they? The working class, Jim. We got left.
Really, we'd be there. I wouldn't have even made it there. I would have been the lucky one still on Earth. But you end up where each person there, you end up assigning these wardens who get helmets that can control these animals. And when I first heard about it, before I even read the one shot, I thought that, like, oh, Rook, he's going to be able to fly, almost like an Animal Man type deal.
Right, yeah.
But it only just controls him. And I'm sitting there like, we're following the main character, Rook, and his power is that he can make crows do things. It's not a great power. It's not really
great. It's not a great power, no. And it's not clear, and he doesn't have control of it, does he?
No, yeah, they're losing because of this world engine. They're losing bits of this control. And what I like about it, and the thing that plays out, because there's him, and then there's his buddy, Swine, who controls these warthog pigs.
Swine is cool.
Yeah. And what I really liked about the idea, because at one point, Rook, he starts talking. Like, he even takes his helmet at one point off and says, I can't deal with these birds. But really, you're only telling him, like, go there, go there. They do end up saving him at one point because this giant bear attacks, and this thing's huge, like a kaiju, and they kind of distract it and irritate it and walks away. They don't do much to it, but they end up making it, like, being
That's part of the play, isn't it, Jim? It's not clear why they say that. We don't know why, but the animals we brought from Earth, like, they've just got so big here. They've morphed into these huge, like, dangerous creatures.
It's funny. They think that it's like having a fish, where if you have a fish in a big tank, it'll get bigger. That's kind of how they play it. I went with it. I'm like, okay. I'm telling you, some of the things in this, I'm still a little confused, but in a good way.
Yeah, same here.
Him and his buddy Swine, I think there's a cool interaction here because they're building a rocket. Most people are, and we even start with a rocket crashing, and there's a guy with a picture of his family, and that's kind of involved. But the big play is they're trying to get off the planet, and it seems that the Swine decides he doesn't want to leave then.
No,
and
that's right.
Get, the thing that got me, and it really reminds me of being a kid, the idea where if you find a dog, a stray dog, and your dad, like my dad, don't name it, because the minute you name it, it's your pet. You're not going to want to get rid of it. And in that, you see where at one point you have Rook say, yeah, these birds are only loyal to this helmet. When this thing's done, they are going to eat me if they're going to attack. And he says the same thing to Swine, the guy who's controlling. And you almost figure, you guys are starving. These are giant pigs. Like, maybe one might be able to be used. But the thing is, if you realize Swine has named these pigs, he's yelling Pumbaa at one point in that. He thinks that they're, pets. And
is that from the Lion King, Jim?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So when he's doing this, he's gone too far. He thinks that they are his friends, and whether or not it's not really his undoing, but it was that kind of deal. You do not see Rook say, oh, Johnny Bird, I haven't seen you in a while. He doesn't name them because he doesn't care. They're just crows. And even the lead into it was he was a farmer on his dad's farm, and he hates crows.
That's right.
Crows ruin the crop, so it's nothing that he likes, but they're there. But he gets annoyed, so I like that. I like that whole...
That was the helmet he got. That was the animal he got control of, so yeah.
You've dealt with crows, so you get that. It's probably his worst nightmare of that animal.
I know,
it really
right?
Doesn't seem really great, but...
I think Swine's in trouble, because look at the size of those wild boars. They're bloody huge compared to the crows, aren't they?
And I'm sitting there thinking, like, you have a bunch of these. Like, yeah, the one you keep saying Pumbaa, but maybe you got that one on the side. Maybe you can make some bacon or something. Like, people are hungry. And as you're going, even in this one issue, you do actually see the world falling apart more. He ends up going fishing. There is a drying up lake that he's able to, like, grab fish. Just grab them because they're in, like, 2 inches. By the middle of the issue, that thing is dried up, and he's got to go somewhere else. Yeah. And also, I really like, you have that whole survival, even the, like, post-apocalyptic stuff where he is going through a city that he's the only one. I like the way I think they say the population used to be 800,000. Now it's me. And yet while he's building this rocket, he's going through.
How gorgeous is that art?
It looks so good.
Spread by Jason Fabok. It's amazing.
If you like sci-fi, if you like just, I don't know how to explain the idea of like the helmets with this animal power type deal, but kind of just that sort of thing. But if you like survival stories, it has it all. It really is really good. And the more I read it, each time I read it, I liked it more.
To me,
really,
it felt
really
the most
good.
original. It felt like, Jeff Johns was trying something new, something different with this one. That's why I liked it the most.
I'm with you. And that's why it's my favorite of the three. It ended up being my favorite, my book of the week. It's my favorite book all week. So I thought it was really good. And that's it. But you have one bit of a shout out at the end just to give it because it's something cool, right?
Yeah, just a quick shout out. It's there's a new issue, a new story arc of Usagi Yojimbo. It's The Crow, issue 1. I don't think Brandon Lee's in it. I'm not quite sure. It's not that Crow, but did you look for him?
R.I.P.
It's basically, it says like, what is it? There's a huge reward. It's Gen and Stray Dog, the bounty hunters, are coming after a reward, and of course, they're going to cross paths with Usagi and Yukichi. That's about it. But Stan Sakai, Jim, you said that you're trying to get into him.
Yeah.
You've got to give him a shot.
I know.
Just can tell really good stories.
Everything I've read is great.
Fantastic storyteller.
It's funny, too. I've read, like, I forget what it was, and it was a while back that I had, like, this one trade that I love. But I've also, since then, I've read a bunch of the TMNT crossovers when they go back, and
yes,
I thought those were really cool. Yeah, they are really cool, and it really works out, especially like the earlier ones where you did have the turtles, and I believe it was Michelangelo, if I'm not mistaken, where he's still young and he goes and they kind of butt heads, and you have like Usagi being like this, almost like the old Salt in the deal. I thought they were really cool, but the art's incredible. It's so good, and yeah, so you gave the shout out, and I might. Yeah, I keep saying, I said it the last time, one of these books that I know that if I go to read it, I'm going to end up starting a podcast. So that's kind of the deal. Do I have any time? Probably not, but I still would.
Can
try.
We do it? Maybe we could do it, Jim.
To do it. Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be awesome. So we'll figure that out. But that is it. We went a little longer this week, but we're also a little ganky because I'm exhausted. And it's funny, like I may go to bed before you, but it's morning for me. I might just go to bed for a while, but we'll see. But I hope everybody.
We went quite long because we're excited to talk about some really good new releases. It's so good to have the Ghost Machine titles coming out, isn't it?
Yeah, and I thought it was going to be more exciting. I think people were excited about it. It just wasn't the hype that the Energon stuff
Maybe
had.
We can make them excited.
Maybe we'll get everybody fired up. And I will tell you that before the shutdown, I would do Marvel and DC and never really dealt with a lot of any sort of indie stuff or manga. And then when the shutdown, I got into manga. And now that we're doing this, I'm getting more and more into indie stuff. And there's always good comics. It's just you have to look for them or be willing to look for them. Some people just want the big two. And that's why people like, oh man, like screw that Marvel and DC, but you have to have them good as well. I'd rather love these indie stuff, but I still hope that I like everything from Marvel and DC, but it's just not happening now. And I think it comes down to bad storytelling. And people will have their other reasons, but I think the bottom line reason is there's not a lot of great storytellers doing the big two, and that has to change. And because obviously some storytelling's being done elsewhere that's really, really good, but we'll see. We'll see. But again, everybody, please go over and check out Gray's channel, the Wakasashi Tea House. I'll have the link in the show notes, but also please tell us what you ended up liking as your best of. And if you end up watching the different videos and all that, I'm going to be doing my preview show, what I anticipate for next week coming up on Sunday night. So check that out as well. But thanks for joining me, Gray, as always.
Thanks a million, Jim.
Yep. And we'll talk to you all later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.